Mr. Saleh was one of the millions of Egyptians who sought employment contracts in the Gulf countries. In the past 40 years, he thought he had fulfilled his lifelong dream. Mr. Saleh traveled to Kuwait 38 years ago and worked as a teacher in the Ministry of Education when he was still a young man. God blessed him, and he got married and had 4 children: Ahmed, Amjad, Abdul Rahman, and Shaima. He took his wife and children, and they lived together in Kuwait, in a place called Abu Halifa, and they were extremely happy. There was nothing they wanted that he wouldn't provide, and he was delighted to be able to make his children happy, always seeing them growing up before his eyes. When his son Ahmed grew up, Mr. Saleh decided that his wife should return to Egypt so that Ahmed could attend college, and Mr. Saleh would continue to visit them on vacations. Indeed, his wife and children returned to Egypt. Ahmed enrolled in the Faculty of Engineering at Cairo University, and Amjad, Abdul Rahman, and Shaima were transferred to schools in Egypt. 5 years passed, and Mr. Saleh worked day and night at the school and in private lessons to provide for his children and his wife, to the extent that he sometimes didn't take vacations to save money for his children. Over time, he began to tire and become dizzy from work. His colleagues would tell him that he had done enough. Mr. Saleh always replied to them, saying that his life is not a loss for his children. He bought a house for them in Egypt, and each of his children had a furnished apartment ready for them. His daughter also had her own apartment, and he provided her with the appliances she would need when she got married. Despite his exhaustion, especially as he neared 60, he was happy to have secured his children's future and was willing to sacrifice even his health for them, content in his love for his children. Until one day he became very tired and began to faint several times. He decided that he would retire to Egypt for good and was very happy that he would finally live among his children and his wife. Ahmed became an engineer, and Amjad enrolled in the Faculty of Commerce, Abdul Rahman in high school, and Shaima in first secondary. He contacted them and informed them of his arrival time, but the surprise was that none of them were there to receive him at the airport. He thought to himself that there must have been unavoidable circumstances, or that one of them was too tired to be able to pick him up at the airport. He took a taxi and arrived home to find them sitting there. They greeted him with a cold greeting, and instead of his wife saying, "Welcome back," she said, "You're here. Weren't you supposed to wait another year until we could afford Ahmed's wedding expenses?" Mr. Saleh smiled, tears glistening in his eyes, and said, "I was planning to stay longer, but I got tired against my will, and I couldn't work anymore." His wife quickly left the room and said, "I'll make dinner anyway," and each of his children went to their room. After about an hour, Mr. Saleh was sitting at home alone, and it was 1 a.m. and Amjad hadn't returned yet. Amjad returned home at 2 a.m., and his father was waiting for him. Mr. Saleh saw his son inside, unable to stand up. His eyes were red. He passed by his father as if he wasn't there, not even saying hello, and was about to open the door to his room when his father asked him, "Why are you sitting like this, and why are you late?" Amjad replied, "Mind your own business and do whatever you want. You came back from the trip to annoy us, didn't you?" Mr. Saleh got up and hit him in the face, saying, "How dare you talk to me like that?" His wife quickly left the room and said, "How dare you raise your hand against our son? It's not enough that you are back, you are acting like a boss now." Ahmed also came out of his room and said to his father, "It's not right for you to hit one of my siblings. We don't even know you at all. Our mother, who worked hard to raise us, you either sit with us respectfully or leave immediately and relieve us." Mr. Saleh was silent from shock, and then he said, "Okay, my son." The next day, Mr. Saleh called one of his colleagues in Kuwait named Mr. Gamal and said, "I want to kiss your hand," and do anything to let me return to Kuwait again." And then he burst into tears. Mr. Gamal said, "Okay, but what happened?" He told him the story, and he said to him, "But what will you do when you return? And how will you live? You have grown up, Saleh, and don't forget that you have resigned from your job." He said, "I will do anything, but let me leave here." Mr. Gamal contacted some acquaintances and explained his circumstances, and managed to arrange a trip for Mr. Saleh to Kuwait. Indeed, Mr. Saleh booked a plane ticket because he didn't have any money, since he'd been sending it in his wife's name. He left the house on the day of departure without telling anyone, because all their words were insults. Mr. Saleh arrived in Kuwait, and Mr. Gamal rented a room for him and took care of his requests, especially since he was elderly and began to be affected by illness from sadness and frustration. Mr. Saleh's condition worsened day by day because of this, so Mr. Gamal decided to take his picture and send it to his wife and children, hoping they would feel sorry for him. Unfortunately, there was no response from any of them. A few days later, Mr. Gamal went to check on him and found him dead. Of course, I have summarized many events that happened because I felt how much a person can be humiliated and insulted. Please pray for him for mercy, because even his children didn't think to return him to Egypt to be buried in his homeland. He lived a wronged man and died forgotten. May God have mercy on you, Mr. Saleh. Everything mentioned in this story is 100% true. Please pray for his mercy and forgiveness.